Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to YPN News, bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Katan, we have several great articles to talk about this week. We have never before seen extreme weather patterns.
Extreme sanctions being placed on Iran.
And Israel continuing to prepare for war. But first, let's go to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who's talking about the job market for lawyers. Now, Larry, tell us, are we understanding this correctly? The lawyers are suing the schools that taught them?
That's right, Jeff. But lawyers aren't the only ones experiencing the crunch. In fact, the number of Americans applying for unemployment benefits increased to over 360,000 people this week, according to recent statistics released by the Department of Labor. According to Chip Reed, a reporter for CBS News, some of the people experiencing difficulty finding employment might come as a real surprise to many. 30-year-old Kevin Johnson, interviewed for CBS News, is a server with a law degree and represents an ever-increasing amount of people whose experience with the Institutes of Higher Learning has cost them much and delivered absolutely nothing. Mr. Johnson was hopeful to achieve his lifelong dream of becoming a lawyer after graduating a New York law school which advertised and promised an 80% higher rate, but he is now serving pizza, saddled with $230,000 in student debt. Today, disillusioned, Kevin believes the entire culture of legal education is misleading, and his sentiment is echoed by Colorado University law professor Paul Campo, who sets the actual higher rate at around 40% and says that used car salesmen couldn't get away with the sort of bogus claims advertised by law schools. In fact, of the 45,000 law students who graduate each year, Campo, who studies the job market, says that 45% will not be able to find a job that requires a law degree, and that many people in law school right now will never become lawyers. The law schools, most of which post at least an 80% higher rate, maintain that they've been honest with regard to employment statistics. But Campo relates that that position includes employment data which is misleadingly derived from non-legal, part-time, and even temporary employment. New York Law School is one of 15 schools now feeling the heat for that practice, as many graduates are now banding together and filing lawsuits against their former schools for fraudulence. As for Kevin, he has recently found temporary employment in legal work, but weighed down with $230,000 in student debt, he cannot afford to leave his primary job as a server. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan, Jeff, back to you.
Amazing. $230,000 in debt and not able to find a job in the field that he went to school for.
Sounds like paying a lot of something for nothing in return. Well, unemployment is not the only thing that's on the rise. In fact, in this week's news, this year's weather has been beyond the norm, breaking records in both weather frequency and intensity. Tornadoes devastated towns and cities as far north as Michigan, who experienced temperatures in the mid to upper 80s in what has been an unusual winter.
Now, Dexter, Michigan, in the southern part of the state, experienced one of the many tornadoes that left the city with a horrific scene of devastation and the people both shocked and homeless, wondering where to turn next. Now, more than 100 homes were damaged and some were even taken down to their foundations. But amazingly, no one was killed or injured.
Eyewitnesses huddled down in their homes, shielding themselves and loved ones from the destruction that this most recent storm brought. In fact, this tornado was rated an EF3 with winds of 145 miles per hour. This was also the earliest the entire state of Michigan has seen a tornado on record, going all the way back to 1950, 62 years ago.
Now, the latest series of tornadoes was brought in part by a jet stream that brought warm weather across the country and setting 1,800 new highs. Now, never before have we seen weather like this. In fact, Chicago had its third day in a row above 80 degrees. Again, never before has this occurred. And for the first time in winter, Bismarck broke 80 degrees. So far, it looks like no end in sight to this warm weather.
Wow. Moving on from the warm weather to the hot tension going on in the Middle East. For months, the tension between Iran and Israel has been rapidly increasing. However, no country has ever been isolated the way Iran is about to be. We learned this week that Iran will be electronically cut off from world commerce.
Now, this is possible because the world's financial transactions go through a central computer hub in Belgium known as SWIFT. Established in 1973, the Brussels-based SWIFT is the spinal cord of the global financial system, a cooperative overseen by the world's banks. Now, more than $6 trillion in banking transactions between banks and businesses flow through its electronic pipelines every day.
Disconnecting Iran from SWIFT is the most severe step taken thus far to try to cripple Iran's economy and force the country to end its nuclear program. If this drastic economic sanction doesn't work, Israel will continue planning for the military option.
In an interview with CBS News, Leonard Schrank, the former CEO of SWIFT for 15 years, explained how and why severing Iran from SWIFT could cripple its economy. He explained that every bank in the world has a code. It's called a bit code, bank identifier code, or SWIFT code. The codes of some 30 sanctioned Iranian banks and subsidiaries, including Iran's central bank, the bank which processes most of the country's oil contracts, will be disconnected at noon on Saturday.
Once SWIFT deletes a code, whether it's for the bank, the central bank, or the entire country, it will prevent them from having any access to or from the system. They'll be cut off. This move could cripple Iran's oil business and force the country into a cash and barter economy.
Now, there are alternatives to using SWIFT, but they're less efficient, less secure, and definitely less automated. And it would take a long time to establish them with all their counterparties. So this move is going to hurt Iran.
Theoretically, SWIFT is supposed to be outside of politics. Therefore, cutting off Iran's banks could set a precedence that could turn SWIFT into a political weapon. Leonard Schrank said, absolutely, it's a neutral infrastructure. But when asked if he believes SWIFT had to make the move, Schrank commented, we're talking about preventing a Mideast war, or worse.
Now, SWIFT said that it was merely complying with the laws of the European Union and that the EU sanctions forced SWIFT to take action.
Now, you may be wondering, what are the Iranian businesses doing in reaction to this? Well, there are reports that are coming that some Iranians are piling their money into speedboats and literally transporting it hundreds of miles, or 100 or so miles, across the Gulf of Dubai so that they can get around this sanction.
So if these sanctions against Iran don't work, the Israeli military is preparing for what many fear is the inevitable war. Now, they're planning for a confrontation with Iran. And in recent drills, soldiers practice decontaminating victims of a chemical weapons attack. Rescue workers practice searching for victims of a missile attack from Iran or one of its allies on Israel's borders, Hezbollah in Lebanon or Hamas in Gaza.
Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Raz said these exercises have a new sense of urgency. When asked, are things getting tense? He said, things in the Middle East are always tense. In fact, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the Israeli parliament that he's prepared to act alone in dealing with the Iranian nuclear threat, with or without U.S. support.
Israel is no stranger to taking matters into its own hands. In 1981, they attacked a reactor in Iraq when they feared Saddam Hussein was trying to build a nuclear weapon. Zev Raz led the mission to attack that reactor and says that he understands the tough talk from the Israeli government, saying that they have no choice but to talk boldly. They have no choice. What can they do? Sit and watch Iran become nuclear? It's much worse.
And this is why they're preparing for the worst. Proponents of an attack said they cannot wait to see if sanctions bite or if the U.S. might join in, and that there's a time to act and time is running out. One more option, of course, is on the table, and that's threatening a nuclear Iran with Israel's own, of course, never officially admitted, nuclear arsenal. Well, it looks like what we're seeing, Jeff, is bullying on an international scale. Seems like if these leaders of today's nations were taught, as Israel Hawkins' father was taught, two wrongs don't make a right, we might be looking at a much more positive and peaceful outcome than what we're getting ready to see here.
That's right.
Now, stay tuned as Israel Hawkins explains Bible prophecies as they relate to the news. For YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thanks for joining us.